The morning I found out my own daughter wanted me dead, I was still in my bathrobe holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold. I hadn't slept well. Hadn't slept well in months, actually. Not since my wife passed. 51 years with the same woman, and then one Tuesday in February she was just gone. Heart attack. The doctor said it was quick. I've tried to believe that. My name is Leonard. I'm 68 years old. I spent 32 years as a civil engineer with the county, designed drainage systems that most people never think about until a road doesn't flood. I retired at 62, and my wife and I had plans. Portugal, maybe, or just the RV sitting in the driveway that we kept saying we'd take out next summer. We never did. Now it sits there collecting dust and I can't bring myself to sell it, because it feels like the last thing that belongs to both of us. That's the version of me my daughter Amber saw when she started coming around more after the funeral. A grieving old man, alone in a 4-bedroom house in Baton Rouge that was worth considerably more than it used to be, sitting on a life insurance payout and a county pension and 40 years of savings that my wife and I had been careful with our entire lives. She saw her father. I believe that, actually. I believe she saw both things at once, her father and what her father was worth, and I think the second thing slowly swallowed the first. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Amber is my only child. We were always close when she was young. She was sharp, funny, stubborn in a way that reminded me of her mother. She married a man named Kyle about 12 years ago, and I liked him well enough at first. He had a loud laugh and firm handshake, and he called me sir until I told him not to. He worked in medical device sales, made decent money, or so I thought. After the funeral, they started coming by more. Every Sunday, sometimes Wednesday too. Amber would bring food, casseroles, grocery store rotisserie chickens, the kind of thing people bring when they don't know what else to do, and I appreciated it. I genuinely did. It felt like being loved. It felt like my daughter was stepping up the way you hope your children will when life gets hard. There were small things I noticed, but didn't want to notice. The way Kyle's eyes moved around the living room when he thought I wasn't looking. The time Amber mentioned, casually, that the house was probably too much for one person now. The afternoon she brought up, just as conversation, she said, whether I'd thought about a reverse mortgage. I was 68, not senile, but I was lonely and I was grieving, and I thought I was just being paranoid, a suspicious old man seeing problems where there weren't any. Then my security cameras stopped working. I'd had the system installed a couple of years earlier. Nothing fancy, just 3 cameras covering the front door, the back porch, and the driveway. My wife had wanted them after a string of porch package thefts in the neighborhood. They ran through a service that recorded footage to the cloud and sent alerts to my phone. In October, the system started glitching. I'd get a notification, open the app, and the feed would be black. Called the company, they walked me through a reset, still nothing. They sent a technician out on a Tuesday, and he spent about 40 minutes in the utility room and left me a sticky note on the router that said fixed. Let us know if issues persist. I meant to test it. I got distracted. The sticky note fell behind the desk and I forgot. That was the detail that saved my life. Amber and Kyle came by that Friday evening. They brought a store-bought pie and a bottle of wine I didn't ask for. We sat at the kitchen table and talked about nothing. Football, the neighbor's new fence, whether I was eating enough. Normal. Comfortable. At one point, Kyle went to use the bathroom and Amber reached across the table and took my hand and said, "Daddy, we just want to make sure you're okay, really okay." And I believed her. I still believe she meant it. At least some part of her did. They left around 9. I washed the dishes, watched the news, went to bed. The next morning I was making coffee and my phone buzzed, an alert from the camera app. That's when I remembered. The technician had come by. The cameras were fixed. I just never checked. I almost ignored the notification. I almost set the phone down and finished making coffee first. Instead, I opened it. The footage was from the previous evening. Timestamp, 8:47 p.m. Amber and Kyle were sitting at my kitchen table. I had apparently stepped out of the room. I think I'd gone to check on something in the garage. I do that sometimes. Walk away in the middle of a conversation because I remembered something I meant to do. I was gone maybe 4 minutes. 4 minutes. I watched Kyle lean forward across the table, and even with the camera audio being a little rough, I could hear him clearly enough. The VA life insurance alone is $250, he said. Add the house at current market and the retirement accounts. We're looking at somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million too, depending on how the accounts are set up. Amber had her hands around her wine glass. She didn't say anything for a moment. He's healthy, she said. He's 68. He's alone. He had a bypass scare 3 years ago. It's not unreasonable. Kyle, I'm not saying anything crazy. He sat back. I'm just saying we should know what we're dealing with, because the situation with Marcus isn't going to fix itself. I stood in my kitchen with my phone in my hand and I felt the floor tilt. Marcus. I knew that name. Marcus Holt was a business associate of Kyle's, or had been. About 8 months earlier, Kyle had mentioned, just in passing, that a deal had gone sideways and there'd been some financial stress. Amber had changed the subject quickly. I hadn't pushed. I wished I had pushed. I watched the rest of the footage. Kyle said they owed Marcus a significant amount of money. He used the phrase significant amount 3 times without giving a number, and the way Amber's face tightened every time told me the number was bad. He talked about the house being the cleanest solution, and said something about how my doctor had mentioned my cholesterol at a family appointment 2 years ago, and these things have a way of progressing. These things have a way of progressing. I had to sit down. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where my daughter had held my hand and asked if I was really okay, and I put my head down and I stayed like that for a while. I want to be honest here. The first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was grief, a second wave of it, almost worse than when I lost my wife, because this was a different kind of loss. My wife died and the world went quiet. Watching that footage felt like finding out the quiet had been a lie. Then the anger came. I am not a man who acts fast when he's angry. That's something my wife used to say she loved about me. She was a reactor, she said, and I was a slow burner, and between the two of us we usually ended up somewhere reasonable. So I sat there and I breathed, and I watched the footage 2 more times, and then I made a decision. I was not going to confront them. Not yet. Not directly. The first thing I did was call my attorney, a woman named Patricia who had handled the closing on my house when I bought it and had been on my Christmas card list ever since. I didn't give her every detail over the phone, just said I needed to update my estate documents urgently and that I had some footage I wanted her to look at. She got me in that afternoon. Patricia watched the video twice. She didn't say much while she watched it, but her jaw got tight. When it was done, she asked me a few questions. About Kyle's business, about Marcus Holt, about whether Amber had ever been listed on any of my financial accounts. One of my savings accounts she had been, as a co-signer. We'd added her after my wife's death, in case something happened to me. That account got changed that same afternoon. Patricia also connected me with a private investigator she had worked with before. His name was Dave. He was 63 himself, stocky, wore a Carhartt jacket and spoke in short sentences. I liked him immediately. He asked me for the camera footage and a few names and said he'd be in touch. He called me 6 days later. Kyle's debt with Marcus Holt was $340,000. This was not a loan from a friend. Marcus Holt ran a small investment group that operated, Dave said carefully, in a gray area, which I understood to mean illegally. Kyle had put money in. The money had been used badly, or fraudulently, or both, and now Kyle owed Marcus money that Marcus had made clear he intended to collect. There was more. Dave had done some digging into Marcus Holt's background and found that 2 other investors who had disputes with him had experienced what Dave called escalating misfortune. One had died in a fall from a ladder at his home 18 months ago, ruled accidental. The other had survived a car accident and subsequently settled all financial disputes with Marcus out of court. Dave did not tell me what to do with this information. He didn't need to. I had been sitting in the middle of something much larger than a daughter who saw dollar signs when she looked at her father. I want to tell you something about that week, about those 6 days between watching the footage and getting Dave's call. I still had dinner with Amber on the Wednesday. I sat across from her and ate the pasta she brought and listened to her talk about her friend's daughter's wedding. And I watched her face and I tried to find the girl who used to sit on the garage steps and hand me tools when I worked on the car. I don't know if that girl was gone or buried or had just made a series of decisions so gradually she hadn't noticed where they led. I don't know if it matters. After Dave's call, I called Patricia again. The next morning, she and I and Dave sat down with a detective from the Baton Rouge Police Department named Sergeant Torres, and I handed over the camera footage, Dave's findings, everything. Sergeant Torres, Ray. Torres listened without much expression and then asked if I'd be willing to allow them some time to build a case. I said yes. I asked how much time. He said a few weeks, maybe a month. I went home and I waited. The hardest part of that month was the pretending. Amber called twice a week. She came by once, brought soup, sat in a living room, and we watched a game show together. I smiled. I asked about her friends. I said nothing. My wife would have found this impossible, the pretending. She would have had something to say. I just kept thinking about drainage systems, which sounds strange. But hear me out. In engineering, sometimes the best thing you can do is just let the water follow the path you've designed for it. You don't fight the current. You redirect it. I also made sure the cameras stayed working. 3 weeks in, Dave called again. Kyle had been meeting with a man twice that month at a diner off Airline Highway. The second man was a low-level associate of Marcus Holt's. Dave didn't know what was being discussed, but the meetings were being documented. Sergeant Bears, Torres called me on a Thursday afternoon and told me they were moving forward. He didn't give me many details. He said they would handle it and that I should keep my regular routines and call him immediately if anything felt off. The following Tuesday, Kyle was arrested at his office. Amber was brought in for questioning the same afternoon. The charges that came from that initial investigation and the weeks that followed included conspiracy and fraud-related offenses connected to Marcus Holt's operation. Kyle, it turned out, hadn't just been a victim of the scheme. He'd been helping to run parts of it. And when detectives presented Amber with the camera footage from my kitchen and asked about the conversation at the table, she broke down. I wasn't there for any of that. I was at home, sitting in my driveway next to the RV, drinking iced tea. Patricia called me that evening. She walked me through what had happened in straightforward terms, the way she does everything. And at the end, she asked how I was doing. I said I wasn't sure yet. She said that was probably honest. Marcus Holt was arrested 6 weeks later as part of a broader financial fraud investigation. The details became complicated and legal in ways I don't fully understand, but what I was told is that the case against him included the suspicious circumstances around the death of the investor who fell from a ladder. Kyle entered a plea arrangement. I don't know the final terms. I don't particularly want to know. Amber. I've thought a long time about what to say about Amber. She wrote me a letter from her attorney's office before any of the proceedings were finalized. I read it twice and I put it in a drawer. I don't think she's a monster. I think she married a man who was in over his head and she loved him more than she should have, and the hole got deep enough that she started looking for a way out of it, and she stopped thinking clearly about who she was and what she was doing. That's the most charitable version. Some days I believe it. Some days I'm not sure it matters. What I know is this: I'm still here. Still in my house in Baton Rouge. Still drinking coffee in the morning. Still walking the neighborhood in the evenings. Still watching too much History Channel late at night when I can't sleep. The RV is still in the driveway. I've been thinking lately about maybe taking it out. Just a week somewhere, nothing dramatic. Up through Mississippi, maybe Tennessee. My wife always wanted to see the Smoky Mountains in the fall. I didn't want to do it without her. I'm not sure I still do, but I think she would have something to say about that, about me sitting in the driveway and not going anywhere. I think she would have said, "Leonard, the drainage system doesn't work if you don't let anything flow through it, so maybe I'll go." The cameras still work. I check them every morning now, first thing, before the coffee. Not because I'm afraid, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some wariness that settled into me permanently. A low hum I suspect will never fully go away. I check them because it reminds me that I almost didn't, that I almost set the phone down and made my coffee first. I am 68 years old and I still have things to figure out. I still have places I haven't been. I still have mornings. I paid attention. And I'm still here. I spent a lot of time since all of this happened trying to understand how it got that far, not to excuse it and past the point where I need to excuse anything, but just to understand it, the way you'd study a fault line after an earthquake, not to be angry at the ground, but to know what you're standing on. What I keep coming back to is this: nothing that happened was sudden. It built slowly, the way debt does, the way distance does. Kyle made a bad decision, then another to cover the first, then another to cover that one, until the hole was so deep that the only way out he could see was through me. And Amber, she made a choice, somewhere along the way, to follow him into that hole instead of climbing out of it. I don't know exactly when she made that choice. I'm not sure she does either. That's what greed actually looks like, in my experience. It doesn't arrive dramatic and obvious. It creeps in wearing the face of someone you love, sitting at your kitchen table, holding your hand and asking if you're really okay. It wears patience. It wears concern. It waits. And the thing about that is, it only works if you stop paying attention. I almost did. I was grieving. I was lonely. And there is a particular kind of vulnerability that comes with those two things together that I hadn't fully understood until I lived it. I wanted to believe my daughter was coming around because she loved me. That's not a foolish thing to want, but wanting something badly enough is not the same as it being true, and somewhere in the fog of those months after losing my wife, I let wanting become believing without doing the work of actually checking. The camera footage didn't save me. I want to be clear about that. What saved me was the decision I made after I saw it. To be still, to think, to act through proper channels rather than react from the gut. To call Patricia. To talk to Dave. To sit across from Amber at that Wednesday dinner and say nothing. Not because I was weak, but because I understood that patience in that moment was the most powerful thing I had. There's a kind of intelligence that doesn't show up on any test. It's the ability to hold what you know quietly, to not let anger make your decisions for you, to trust the process even when every part of you wants to flip the table. I'm not naturally gifted at a lot of things, but I think I'm reasonably good at that. My wife used to say I was slow to act but right when I moved. I'll take that. What I want to say to anyone who sees something of their own life in this story is, the people who depend on your inattention are counting on you staying tired, staying sad, staying too polite to ask the hard question. That's the whole plan. Your awareness, your willingness to stay curious about what's actually happening around you, to check the camera, to make the call, to sit with an attorney for an afternoon, that is not paranoia. That is integrity toward yourself. You earned what you have. You built what you built. You don't owe anyone your silence about that. I'm still in my house in Baton Rouge. The RV is still in the driveway. And for the first time in a long while, I think I'm actually going to take it somewhere.